Welcome into the 24/7 Sports College Basketball Show. I'm your host, Adam Finkelstein, and I am very excited because this is a bit of a historic episode because this is the first time that we are going outside the CBS family to have someone else in, and that person is Sam Vecenie, the senior writer at The Athletic and the host of the Game Theory podcast. Sam, thanks so much for joining us here today.
I mean, I just couldn't be more honored that I'm number one here. I mean, coming to
You are.
24/7, beautiful CBS affiliate. I'm so happy to be back in my original stomping grounds.
Well, we are thrilled to have you back. Quick kind of background, I will say. Sam and I have met in person just once, I think, very briefly at the twice, last two Final Fours.
Couple times,
Yeah,
yeah.
like hey, yeah. But I think we were put in touch by a mutual friend a few years ago. I would describe that friend as a prominent college coach who said to me, he was like, you two would really like get along. You're basically like have the same lifestyle. Um, and then when I came here from ESPN like 2.5 years ago now, and I officially started covering the NBA draft, I was obviously familiar with ESPN's coverage, but the first person I really dove into was your content, and I was just super impressed right away because it was smart, and there's so much content out there right now that for me, like smart is my first requisite. And
Yeah.
the second one, which is just as important, is it was unbiased. Like you're well sourced, but you watch everything yourself. And when I hear what you're saying, I don't ever think like, oh, that's a narrative he's got to perpetuate for some GM or for some agent or whatever the case. So
Yeah.
I was pumped to have you on this episode because obviously the college basketball season has started. I dropped volume one of the Draftables, and with my background in terms of like balancing NBA draft with high school recruiting, naturally I just see a lot more of the American born players, right? So
Yeah.
my usually this time of year, I'm always playing catch up on the international kids in the draft. So we are going to talk NBA draft today, and specifically, we are going to get into some of those international players because, candidly, I just think you know them better than I do right now, and I think it would be a great opportunity for my viewers to kind of get a 30,000 foot view of some of these guys. Although I don't think we don't have a Wemby or a Doncic in this draft, but still, there's a lot of international names that are getting a lot of draft buzz. Um, Before we do that, though, I want to hit one big theme for this NBA draft, and that is this: like a lot. A lot of the people who cover the NBA draft, it seems to me there is a consensus top five right now. And I'm
Yeah.
like, hey, everybody, like we haven't played a game yet, in college
Right.
basketball. Like it's way too early for that. Obviously, I'm on record as saying like, hey, I don't want to do mock drafts until like I'm absolutely forced to, and editor Trey often forces me to or earlier than I want to. But I
Yeah.
just think it's so I want to see where you fall in this because obviously the top five, everybody's talking about Cooper, obviously Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, VJ Edgecombe, and then Nolan Traore. Those are the five that basically you check any mock draft, and those seem to be the top five. And that's probably an accurate representation of where we are right now. But I don't think because it's a consensus, I think everybody assumes it's a foregone conclusion, and I do not
Yeah.
think that is the case. So just wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah. I would honestly bet that the top five does not end up being the top five. Like those five names that you have just, laid out, I feel quite confident that those names will not end up being the names that go, you know, in the top five of the draft, come June or whatever. So, yeah, I completely agree with you. Look, I really like Cooper Flagg. I think that he is an outstanding player. I love his competitive character. I love how aggressive he is. I love the defensive ability, but Cooper has offensive questions that he's going to have to answer on some level at Duke this year. Ace Bailey has questions from scouts about just how easy anything is for him because everything is this mid-range jumper and he looks great getting into it.
Time. That's always been my knock. It is a home run swing
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
But NBA scouts love when things are easy
Mm.
as much as anything else. Yeah. Dylan Harper, he's a guy that I really love. I love his feel. I love his ability out of ball screens, and I love how he strings together moves off the bounce, but he's not the most explosive athlete in the world for a lead guard in a world where we love very shifty, explosive, twitchy lead guards. VJ Edgecombe has all of the twitch that you could want in some respect, right? But needs to work on his left hand, needs to work on his overall on-ball versatility. And then Nolan Traore, I mean, his games have been a roller coaster over in Europe to this point. He has had moments where he has dropped like 27 points and 8 assists, and he has games where he goes like 3 for 10 from the field and really struggles. So it's a mix, and all of these guys are not without flaw. And I'll be honest, I want to ask you this
Yeah.
while we're here. I feel like there's this narrative that this draft is incredibly strong compared to past iterations. I've been saying that I think that the 2023 draft honestly like looked stronger in the preseason between Victor and what we thought Scoot was and Amen Thompson and guys like that. And I think by this point we had an indication of what Brandon Miller was going to be, maybe not quite at the level, but anything out of Alabama was that he looked absolutely outstanding in the preseason.
Yep.
So I'll just kind of ask you this question. Do you see this draft as the quote unquote generational draft like I've seen that narrative go around, and I don't know that I quite align with that.
No, I don't align with it either. I think these five prospects are really exciting. I think there are other guys that will inevitably play their way into that mix. And let me be clear, like when you say basically reiterate, my point is it's probably not going to be these five. It's not because I don't like any one of these five. It's just because I'm betting
Yeah.
on the field of somebody else probably emerging more so than we're expecting in November, basically because that's what happens almost every year.
Yeah.
So but no, I don't. I think, and I'm going to say this about Cooper too. And this is, I say this kind of thing a lot because I have to start evaluating these guys really early on. Some of the
Yeah.
hyperbole around Cooper over the course of the last 3 years. I mean, this poor kid is 17 years old, and he's been compared to everybody from Victor Wembanyama to Larry Bird. I mean, it's absurd. Now, to his credit, he has lived up to it. But like the amount of expectation that is on this kid, and Cooper's a really good player, but like when I get asked to comp him, I usually go something like Andre Kirilenko, like
Yeah.
it's not like elite defender, and I mean like the big time version of Andre Kirilenko, but I think there's a lot of questions. I think the depth of this draft is very much still in question. I think that's part of
Yeah.
the narrative about why there's this consensus top five because nobody can figure out who else is in that mix just yet. But I would phrase it like this is, and I think I said this to you off the air, like I think it's Cooper and Ace kind of in that topish tier to me. I think Dylan's like kind of next. And I don't know Nolan Traore. We're going to get into that more, but VJ is next behind that. The other thing I will say, having listened to your podcast, I have more questions about the shooting with both Dylan and VJ
Yeah.
because Dylan's going to need to shoot because he's not an elite athlete. He's got great size, got great strength, length, mind for the game, but he's going to need to shoot. And VJ, I'm not. It's a little stiff, like the release, and it's just not
Yeah.
as fluid as I would like. And I don't want to get into the weeds on any of those guys or make it sound like I'm nitpicking, although that is. But I think both of those guys have to shoot before I'm comfortable saying like they're surefire, no brainer, top five guys. So I
Yeah.
would say that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah. And to the point on VJ, right? Like, I think VJ can really shoot off the catch. But
Mm,
if you look at any of his pull up numbers to this point in his career, like they are like in the 20s
mm.
from three, like not particularly high from the mid range either. So I think he has some work to do in terms of getting like his lower half organized, right? And Dylan is, a guy that takes a ton of tough shots and took a ton of tough shots in high school and on the AAU circuit, right? So I want to see where the shooting settles, right? Like hopefully he gets more open shots this year where we get like a bit of a better sample. So yeah, it's interesting to kind of dive into those guys, but I do think the odds are that some of the guys we're going to talk about, I'm sure today, between Kasparas, Jakucionis, or whoever could end up jumping into this group pretty easily, I think.
All right, well let's get into that because as I said, this was and I should also lead with this. You live in Australia. Um,
I do.
so it allows you at first I was like, man, how does he do that? And then now I'm like really envious of your daily architecture and the way it allows you to, I would imagine just now I get like maybe why you're able to consume so much basketball. Quick sidebar here. We were this summer, I think I told you this. This summer I was on the road. My wife, I called her at the end of the day. We're talking and I forget what we were talking exactly about, but she's like, you're a workaholic, right?" And I was like, "No, hon, I'm
Yeah.
not a workaholic." And then she's like, "No, you are." And my wife's like a PhD. She's a doctor, like, and I was
Mm.
just like, and then so I really can't argue with her on that front. But then I was just so I kind of settled on, "You okay with that? Like me being a workaholic?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm good." I was like, "Well, great." Because this guy, Sam, I think is worse. He watches more games than I do. I think it's got to be like the being in Australia seems to help. And it also, I think, gives you uh, touch points to some of these international kids, especially the kids who are playing over there, more so than I would have. So if you want to tell us about Australia, please feel free. But then I do want to pick your brain on these on these international prospects.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you're going to be making the move from the NEPSAC to the NBL one or, whatever here coming up. That's the move. Come on down. Live in Melbourne. It's beautiful here. No, so like I live in Melbourne because my wife is from here and we
Oh,
wanted
I
to
didn't.
move back, right?
Cool.
So, we live 15 minutes from the house she grew up in and her parents still live there and we love being here, right? So that's the biggest reason why we moved, It's not like we were getting political over here or anything. It was just
There, in,
you know,
by the way. So we're yeah, right.
yeah, right. It was just good for us at the
Awesome.
end of the day. And what I love about my job is, I kind of explained it to you is just it's not quite like a 9 to 5 because I end up having to wake up a little bit earlier just to get through all of the news. And when I wake up, my phone is on fire
Yeah.
because it is 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock East Coast time, and I just see everything that has happened. I'll wake up to, 8 or 10 text messages at least per day. And, something will have happened during the season.
Mm.
And I will get that jolt of energy and wake up, and then I'll go and watch tape or I'll make phone calls, whatever I have to do to get the intel I need. But, it's a really, really great uh, lifestyle, if only because I do kind of get nights to myself and my wife
Yeah.
now a little bit in a way that it's difficult to do when you live over in the United States and games happen at night.
Mm.
So that's the benefit, and I'm very, very lucky that I get to do it.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool indeed. All right, so I want to ask you about, and I should be transparent. You sent me a list of your top international prospects in this year's draft, and I just kind of want to get
Yeah.
your, as I said, 30,000 foot view, assuming the fans who are watching this maybe have never seen these guys play before, and how you would describe them from a macro sense. The first one is obviously Traore. Is it Traore or Traore?
Traore is what I've been saying. I'm willing to hear out either.
Let's go
I'll
with that.
talk to him at some point, probably.
Oh, 6'4" guard from France, currently playing in Saint Quentin, I believe. I called one of their games last year. That's the best I got. What would I know you said he's really inconsistent at this point, but what's the baseline of who he is and who he could be as a player?
Yeah, so the idea here is like a 6'3" guard with a 6'6" wingspan, something in that ballpark, who can really be your floor general, is the idea. He's really, really sharp in ball screens, mixes the ability to score and pass at a really high level. Now, the question with him has always been the shooting. I will be interested to see how the shooting holds up over the larger sample of this season in the top French league. We got to see him at Hoop Summit this past year, where he was, along with VJ Edgecombe, the best player on the international team
Mhm.
over at Hoop Summit, and was really, really terrific in all of the practices we got to see. He was really able to create a significant number of scoring opportunities for his teammates. And then he went overseas, played at the Next Generation tournament, was terrific there. And then went over and played for Saint Quentin. I also struggle with pronunciation, and I took French in high school, and I still struggle with that one. Uh, he went over and played for Saint Quentin and was really terrific late in the season. But so far, it's been a little bit of a yo-yo where he has these great games, then he has games where he struggles a little bit. He's not an overwhelming athlete,
Hmm.
is the big thing. And I think that there are times where crowds can kind of, obviously spacing is so important in
Hmm.
today's game. And we saw this at the under 18s this summer, for instance, where France put this team around him that had no spacing. He can sometimes struggle a little bit with turnovers in a crowd, can sometimes struggle a little bit with scoring in that mid range area a little bit. So I would like to see him continue to grow in that respect because I think that's what he's going to need to be elite with. He's going to need to be elite with his footwork, with his ability to make decisions in a crowd. He's 18 years old. He's so young. All of this stuff will come. But because he doesn't have that crazy level of athleticism, the stuff on the margins is really going to matter for him. And I'm not really projecting him as like a surefire all star.
Yeah.
Uh, I think his upside is probably a little bit lower than some of the guys that we've talked about
You like
above him. With
this point?
I do. I like VJ. I like Dylan. I like Ace a little bit better than Nolan at this stage. That's not to say like that upside doesn't exist. It
Yeah.
very well might as he continues to grow and get better. But I'm kind of projecting him more as like a really good starting point guard
Okay.
in the NBA right now, more than a elite level playmaker in the Trey Young or
Yeah.
John Morant, those kind of molds.
Right. Okay. Another guard, and these guys play on the same team, and so I have a follow-up question on this because they came over and they played a
Yeah,
preseason game against Portland, which just screams to me Schmitz gets better access than everybody else. But Ben Saraf, 6'5", currently playing in Germany, but he's Israeli. Is that correct?
correct. Yeah,
And you have him like so. Let me preface it this way. Volume one of the draftables was basically just a list of names. Volume two will be where I start to batch them a little bit, like as a
yeah.
hope to be a replicate of what NBA scouts do around this time. And the top tier to me is like potential lottery picks. Like, is Ben Saraf a potential lottery pick, or is he more of like a potential first round guy? Sounds like he's somewhere on the bubble, maybe.
Yeah, I think of him more on the bubble. Like I would have him in like a 10 to 25 group. Like, and this is what is so hard about this early stage of this draft, right? I have this group of five, right? Where I feel really good about that group. I feel really good about Kasparas Jakucionis, who we'll talk about later on, who's going to be playing for Illinois. After that, and Con Knepel, I would say, is joining
Mhm.
that group based off of feedback I've gotten and based off the fact that I was higher on him to begin with anyway. So
Did you see my thing on him? Quick, you know, no, I haven't seen him play since
really,
spring of his junior year. His team refused to play in Peach Jam. They didn't go to Peach. Imagine that, having the leading scorer in the EYBL and then saying, "Nope, we're not going to Peach Jam. We're going to our own event." And like, ooh,
sure,
then he didn't make the McDonald's All-American game. Was there a connection? I don't know. But
yeah,
and their team didn't play a national high school schedule, so like
right.
no one saw him. And yeah, so it's anyway, quick sidebar, apologies.
Every time I've watched that kid's tape, I'm just like, oh, this is very much me in terms of what I love. Just super high feel, great shooter, unbelievable scorer, great pat, like the whole thing. I was just like, okay, if as long as he's not 6 foot 3.5 or something, like I'm gonna feel pretty good about this watching on tape. And yeah, I mean, I had him at I think 15 or 16 in my first mock, like immediately after last year's draft.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I've only just heard better and better things coming out of Duke from scouts.
All right, so I digress. Back to Seraph,
But
and
to Sarah, yeah, you asked a question and I sidebarred it.
I did it. I did.
Uh, so with Seraph, I would batch him like in a 10 to 25 group right now. I feel good about a certain number of players in this class. And then the rest of them, I think, just are kind of like first round guys to me right now that could emerge a little bit higher into that lottery group, like you said, could end up more in that, later first, early second group. And his teammate Noah Essengue, by the way, also falls into this batch of players as well.
And if you had to prototype these guys, like give me the tweet
Sure.
on the chapter. Like is Saraf like a high feel versatile guard with size?
Yes.
That's the archetype.
Yeah, like lefty, 6'5", 6'6" guard that his superpower is the ability to decelerate, not accelerate. He really slows down well. He just needs to get stronger kind of across the board in order to actually weaponize that.
Yeah.
Uh, the shooting has been a bit of a question at this point, but he can really pass the ball with his left hand, needs to work on his right hand. I
Uh,
would say that's kind of like the overall sense of him.
and how
With
about
Essengue, yeah, he is like this 6'9" athletic, like coordinated forward where I've struggled a little bit to identify what his exact role is going to be.
Mhm.
In Europe, previously playing for the French national team, he's played like the 3, 4, 5, kind of all across the positional spectrum. And he has never really shot it before.
Mm.
But he looks long, but like the measurement we got from Basketball Without Borders was not particularly long last year. There's like a weird uh, mix up there with the measurement that I can't quite figure out yet in terms of where he's actually going to settle. He's just this very strange player, but he's a terrific athlete. You can see real defensive upside in terms of switchability. Like you can envision him being able to switch on to guards and having no problem there. The key is offense, where I think that he can really pass for his size. I don't think I really trust him putting the ball on the floor at this point, but he has some moments where you think he can shoot. He has touch, I would say, but the shot mechanics really are going to be a rewrite, I would say, over the course of the next few years. Where does that kind of leave him? It leaves him as like a real question mark in this draft. You could sell me truly, Adam. You could sell me on him going seventh or eighth overall in this class by the end of the year if he has like an incredibly productive year. And that is the other thing with him. He has always been pretty productive and he has been fairly productive so far. Or you could sell me on him being more of like a late first, early second round guy, depending on what we see from a skill development standpoint over the course of this pre-draft season. Last thing I'll note on him, he's one of the youngest players in this class. He has like a November or December birth date in 2006, so 2006. So will be interesting to track throughout the year because of how young he is.
And that's kind of what you just said is kind of where I'm at with so many players in this potential draft class. And I think
Yeah.
when we look back at this, like historically speaking, you put your take at, like you said, you had your I actually had one out too, against all my objections, but mock draft day after, and it was you kind of put your name on your opinion real early on in the process, and it's hard because there's so much that's left undetermined. So all right, real quick, I want to go through a couple of these other guys. Hugo Gonzalez, 6'6" from Real Madrid in Spain. Would we call him a wing, or you're going guard on him?
I would say he's a wing, awesome motor, great defender, very productive at lower levels, always has been, just has this really, really high feel for the game. The key for him is the shot. The shot mechanics really need quite a bit of improvement. I think he shows some touch. I think he shows some potential to be able to shoot it at some point, but that's going to be the swing skill for him. He needs to be able to showcase that he's going to be able to shoot it at some point. In terms of an early grade, I would say anywhere he's in that 10 to 25 bucket for me as well.
Now, Alex Toohey is another one, and I think you've seen him live recently, right? Because he's in
Yeah.
Sydney playing in the NBL. Obviously, he was a one-time Gonzaga commit who never got there. Now in his second year in the NBL, but where is he at? Because there was some draft talk around him last year. He decided to go back, but he was eligible last year, right?
He was eligible last year. This is his second year as a NBL Next Star. So Alex is interesting, and I'll take this second just to talk about really the 3 or 4 NBL prospects that are interesting here. Uh, Toohey for me right now is the top of that group. He is this 6'8" wing who can shoot the ball and I think has really good feel for the game. Defensively, he's constantly communicating. He talks. He's long. They have him guard perimeter players pretty regularly. Just not a super athlete
Yeah.
at the end of the day. Rocco Zakarski is probably the one that people might have the most name recognition with,
Mhm.
maybe is
Yeah.
fair to say.
Here too.
Seven, yeah, 7'2", 7'3", big man. Had a lot of offers from different schools, right? Like I think North Carolina offered him. Like I think there are a number of different universities that really tried to get him over there. And he's just exceptionally raw. Like he is still extremely, extremely young. He just turned 18 years old and he's still kind of learning how to use his body. He might be a 2025 NBA draft pick. He might be more of a 2026, 2027. I'm not totally sure yet, but from a tools perspective, he is 7'3". He is mobile. He's pretty coordinated and he just needs to kind of work through some of the footwork stuff and some of his touch around the rim, some of his touch on the move, but he wants to be that kind of big man. Like he understands like he doesn't need post touches
Yeah.
to be productive, right? Like he's like, I want to screen, I want to roll, I want to play that way.
He
Uh,
gets modern big man basketball.
he totally understands that. Yeah. And has made a three this year and takes them occasionally. I don't know if that's a big part of his game yet, but has potential.
All right.
Third guy that I would bring up is Ben Henschel. Ben Henschel is the 6'5" guard playing for Perth right now. He just dropped 26 points and 6 assists this weekend. Was really, really good. Really skilled playmaker. I've kind of called him like Western Australia, like Tyler Hero. He's not quite that skilled as Tyler was, but that style of game. And yeah, doesn't he doesn't guard either. That's the thing. Yeah. And then the last guy I'll bring up is Ethan Almanza, a guy that was with the G League Ignite last year. He's also over in Perth.
I'm a
Yeah,
fan.
he's a interesting player. Really, really skilled. Really, really great hands. Knows how to play the game at a high level. Just not a super athlete at the end
Yeah.
of the day, and
Got it.
needs to shoot it. That's exactly right, Adam.
Yeah, but I think he can really think the game at a high level. And if he gets to the point
Agree.
he can make a standstill three and space you out a little bit, he's going to be able to play out of all those modern offensive actions. I got a chance to get to see him because he was at Ignite last year and he was at OTE before that. Neither place
Yep.
was as successful as he's been in FIBA basketball, though. I know there's a couple more guys, but I want to turn my attention to two international players who are in the US playing college basketball this year because these to me when we talk about who could crack the top 5, these to me are two players that are at least very interesting and could be in the conversation if everything goes well. You've seen them more than me, especially in person, and that's BYU's Egor Demin and Illinois' Kasparas. I'm terrible with pronunciations. Jakucionis, we're gonna say they're gonna put that on my.
Yeah. So
We mispronounced his name, so he mispronounced everybody else's. Tell me about your impressions of Igor first and foremost.
I think he pronounces it Yegor.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's where we're at. Yep.
so Jaeger is a guy that I did not love, if I'm being completely honest, when I watched the tape. I have not seen Jaeger live yet,
Oh,
but I have seen Jakucionis live.
okay.
Uh, Jaeger, when I watched the tape, I did not love it because I thought he was like all in transition and I wondered what exactly he would do in the half court.
Hmm.
The shooting at the next generation tournament was not particularly good last year. Turned it over quite a bit. And I felt like it was a bit of a struggle at times for him to be able to really run half court offense. But the idea here is that he's a 6'8" point guard, basically. He's a 6'8", like real playmaker.
Let me
Now, what
ask.
I will
Here, finish that thought, and then I've got a follow up.
what I will say, Adam, is every scout that I've talked to who has been through BYU in the preseason has been like, no, he's very real.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm like already like preemptively taking L's on this, like, and I haven't even like publicly said like what my official take is really. Uh, but privately, like when I've brought him up to teams, I've been like, man, like I don't really love it. And there's like dude, trust me. Like when we saw him at BYU, it's gonna work.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. I will say this though, and this is not about him specifically, but this is more of like an archetype observation. That archetype to me is the highest risk, highest reward one, like
Yeah.
the quote unquote big point guard. Like if it goes, everybody gets borderline seduced by the idea of the big point guard, but it's really hard, especially if you're a non-shooter. If you're a big secondary ball handler who can play pick and roll on the second side of the floor and you can make a shot, great. But
Yep.
if you can't make a shot, and we're not really sure if you're like a primary. I know point guard in the NBA is almost an oxymoron at this point, but like that is a risky prototype with a long range of outcomes. But I'm going to see him live in about a month, and I'm really looking forward to that. Let's go to Illinois. Tell me, I'm gonna have you pronounce it, but you're much higher on this guy, and I think I've heard again like really good things about him. Like Illinois is already like, yeah, he's one and done. It's done.
Yeah.
But what was your take on him?
Yeah. To your point on Demin, too, like, Quentin Grimes is a prime example of this in terms of just having outs,
Yeah.
right? If you're a big playmaker who can knock down shots, you have outs. His career is a perfect justification of all of this, where early in his career, he couldn't knock down shots and ended up having to stay in college for 3 years because of it. He learns how to shoot, goes from being a big playmaker to a big wing who can defend and do some different things. So it's a really good point. On Kasparas Jakucionis
No.
is how you say his name. He is a 6'5" ish. Let's go with combo E guard, but he
Yeah.
can run point. Like for the Lithuanian under 18 national team this summer, like ran a lot of point and was completely comfortable doing it. He can really, really pass the ball. The question is going to be, can he consistently separate
Mm,
enough to be able to play that lead guard role in the NBA? I think he'll be able to do it this year at Illinois and do it in college. But can he consistently separate from his man enough outside of a ball screen to be able to be like that playmaker that you need? And I do think that goes underrated. People talk about the NBA being so ball screen driven. You do still need to be able to break down defenders in isolation in some respect. And I want to see where Yakashonis falls there, but can really shoot the ball. I think it comes out of his hand cleanly as kind of like a weird cupped follow through, but I think he will shoot it. If not consistently this year, he will shoot it down the road. And just a really high field playmaker at the end of the day. That's what it comes down to with him. He really, like, I assume they're going to give him the ball. That's kind of been the intel that I've gotten. They'll let him and Kylan Boswell kind of share it, but he'll probably get a little bit more of the share there. And he's going to be able to make plays, and I'm really excited to watch it.
yeah, me too. I'm pumped to see both of those guys live in the next Yegor I will see earlier, but really excited about that one. Sam, my last question for you. While you were sleeping, my draftables list came out. I put a
Yeah,
ton of guys on there. So my question, and I've posed this question to a couple of friends and some people who commented on Twitter. Who did I miss? Like, did you have it? Like,
sure.
who am I not? Who am I? Like, Twitter gave me one of the Indiana guards. But that's the whole point of this. Like, we've got almost 200 players that are on the list here. You know who I will tell you I left off very deliberately. I didn't go like super freshman heavy on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like I've heard good things about Jeremiah Fears at Oklahoma. In terms of what scouts have thought. My own impression, and this is potentially confirmation bias, is like a lot of these scouts, especially in the preseason, are kind of catching up to where we were at the end of the high school season. Like they see the talent,
sure.
they see him, they're gonna start to see some of the concerns. But I've gotten like, hey, Chad Baker Mazzara is not on there, and
Yeah.
uh, different guys. But is there anybody as you glance through this that you're like, oh, Fink forgot about that guy?
So Baker Mazar is a good name. I do really like him. He is a interesting 6'7" wing at Auburn, who can kind of do a little bit of everything, but isn't great at anything, is maybe the easiest way to put it right now. The name I've gotten most, and this could just be a product of scouts having been down to Chapel Hill quite a bit to this point, is every scout I've talked to, and I don't know if he's draftable or not this year, but I'd probably have him like on the watch
Yeah.
list at the very least, is Seth Trimble.
Hmm.
Uh, I've gotten like really awesome feedback on him. so
Is he
far that he has been. Go ahead.
is he shooting? Like, is he making standstill shots?
That's what I was told. I mean, that he was shooting and that he was attack oriented. I mean, look, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens whenever they get on the court, right? But I was told like he looks a little bit ahead of Ian Jackson, and whether or not he starts over Drake Powell is just a question of what they decide to do in
Yeah,
terms of their rotations, right? Do they start Drake and Cade Tyson at the the 3 and the 4? Do they go three guards? They could go a lot of different directions if they want to, but yeah, Seth Trimble's the name I've gotten, quite a bit of just in terms of, hey, this guy's taken a really big leap from what we saw last year to what we see this year.
I like it. Very cool. All right, I'm gonna have to check out Seth Trimble. Everybody, Sam Vecenie, senior writer at The Athletic, host of the Game Theory podcast. If you listen to one non-CBS podcast, make sure it's Game Theory podcast. And I do, hand in the air. Sam, thank you so much for doing this. Really always enjoy talking ball with you and hope to do it again soon.
We'll do it again soon, Adam. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Thank you.